I always hide it from me. Okay. So I will let Andrea go ahead.
All right. Do you want me to introduce myself or?
Sure. Well, why don't we? Yeah, we can do that. We can just do a quick go round for who's here on time. So you go first, and then we'll have everybody else just take a second.
Okay. I'm a cultural anthropologist that's worked primarily in international development on multidisciplinary teams, and I focus on social inclusion at the intersections of gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and other variables that may be important. And evaluation has interlaced my career. It hasn't been the sole focus, but since leaving MSU about a little over a year ago, I have started my own business focusing in the US and providing participatory qualitative methods. Love to work with quantitative professionals on mixed methods approaches, interrogate our data. I also really enjoy capacity building or accompaniment, however we're framing it. And I have, at the end of my slide stack today, have a QR code that can connect with me. So.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Wes, would you like to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. My name is Wes Davenport. I currently work for the R Street Institute and am wrapping up my Master's of Economics at George Mason Online.
Great, thanks, Wes. Jan?
Hi, I'm Jan Fields, and I work for the State Health Department, and specifically with the injury and violence prevention section with the opioid crisis. I'm program evaluator for them.
Thanks, Jan. Stan?
Person who is now retired after 43 years, but who's still doing peer reviews for the Council on Accreditation. In fact, I'm going to be doing Tennessee in about 2 weeks, the child welfare system. So, but been at it 43 years. I am now living in Florida. All right, I am now in my new house, and if anybody wants a tip, if you live in a house for 40 years and you need to get rid of some stuff, there's nothing like 1-800-GOT-JUNK.
Thanks for the hot tip. And congrats on your move. Kristen, hi. You want to do a quick introduction?
Hi, I'm Kristen Everett. I'm in Kalamazoo. I'm an independent consultant. I primarily work in STEM ed and with educational organizations and nonprofits.
Thanks, Kristen. Robert.
Yeah, similar to Kristen, I do primarily STEM evaluation work. I recently retired from working with Science and Mathematics Program Improvement at Western Michigan University after being there for 16 years. Currently doing most of my work through my LLC, and I'm living in Uganda right now, actually. So I'm in Africa.
Good afternoon or good evening, I guess.
It's yeah, it's about 8 o'clock in the evening here.
But I can still see sun behind you, so you don't have to deal with that pesky daylight savings time or whatever we're dealing with here.
No, we don't switch the clocks here, so.
Yeah, that's good.
But
Jody, can you get in between your bites?
Yeah. I'm Jody Galacy, and I'm an internal evaluator at the Knowles Teacher Initiative, which supports beginning high school math and science teachers. It's located near Philadelphia, but I work remotely from Muskegon, Michigan.
Great, thanks, Jody. Donna.
Hi, everybody. I am new to this group. This is my first meeting, and excited to be here. I have a PhD in biometry and epidemiology, and I've had probably a 25-year career. Most recently, I am with Booz Allen Hamilton, and I'm literally working on a proposal that is going out early next week. So I'm going to turn my camera off just in case I'm getting pinged to do different things, but excited to join the group and learn from all of you.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Donna. Okay, and then I'm Cheryl Andrus, and I'm an independent consultant as well, based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And along with Jan and Sal, who is not with us today, co-founded this networking group. So thanks to all of you for being here today, and I'll say happy Thanksgiving to all of you in advance of, because we don't know if Andrea's got lots to share, so we want to turn it over to her as quickly as we can. Andrea.
All right. Okay, hang on a minute while I pull this up and use my new skills. It's just going to take a minute. And then switch. I'm getting this weird thing where it's not allowing. The switching, which one I'm using is. I'm going to try. Okay. I am needing to move my picture so I can see things. Hold on. Oh, I see. This is what happens when a boomer uses new technology. Did it? Yes. So I am looking forward to discussing the role of evaluation as practice in a trust-based context and using this video as a point of departure. Even if you haven't seen the video yet or viewed it, read anything about trust-based philanthropy, I will cover the basics. And while this whole set of videos with the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project is focused on foundations and philanthropy serving organizations, I really found it enlightening to consider the funder perspectives as they advance on this journey. My efforts to explore how smaller, low resource nonprofits hereabouts in town in Kalamazoo, I'm looking at, doing a lot of work asking, how are these organizations experiencing evaluation? And one colleague told me they mostly hate evaluation. Far too often it's viewed as a really perfunctory information gathering task, laborious writing task with way too much time that requires staff to take staff away from the real work that they want to do in the community. So, and meanwhile, in the traditional approach, the inherent power imbalances are not challenged at all. And information generally flows in one way from grantee to funder, with a focus on compliance, monitoring, improving-based reporting. Meanwhile, distrust seems to flow on a two-way street. And actually, one of the panelists in the video today has a blog post from this summer that talks about how organizations, I'll quote her, organizations share what they believe funders will want to hear, and staff then pass along the information they think boards will want to hear. And it's a game that many know is being played, but that our sector refuses to call out. And she goes on to say, many funders, my former self among them, ask grantees for reports and data that never or rarely get read. So to put us on the same page, I've organized the presentation part. It's only about 15 minutes with plenty of time for discussion. But first, I explore why it makes sense to learn about the trust-based movement in U.S. philanthropy. Second, what trust-based philanthropy looks like in general, what the videos call a grounding on the topic. And then third, key takeaways that I gleaned from this fifth video in the series on how evaluation fits into the formula. And thereafter, there'll be at least 20 minutes or more to talk about this. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you think. And also, if anybody's had any experience working in this context before. In my case, I was launched just recently, starting out as an independent consultant. And so I've been doing a landscape analysis of what's happening here in Kalamazoo, particularly with the small nonprofits who I imagined were my niche. And and also those working on equity issues in particular. And I discovered one very large local funder explicitly discussing trust-based philanthropy on their website. Then I found that another local funder was presenting on trust-based philanthropy at a national meeting. So I really started digging into the topic. And I eventually ran across this Trust-Based Philanthropy Project website, including efforts to track the change that they have observed among 20 or so funders and they call PSOs, philanthropy serving organizations with whom they're connected. And this map shows how they've been tracking that work. But everything that I learned about Southwest Michigan foundations in particular, or Michigan in general, is not yet portrayed on this map. For example, this summer, while I was carrying out a small gig for United Way of Southeast Michigan with Kristen here today, I was looking around for United Way guidance from their national office, and I discovered that this same trust-based philanthropy project, together with United Way of South Central Michigan, was facilitating an in-person session at the United Way national meeting just this summer. And then I eventually learned that this same project was scheduled to hold a breakout session at the Conference of Michigan Foundations, most recent conference held in Detroit just last week. So there's that line of argument that if you want to work with foundations at all, we want to start paying attention. And I just talked with a colleague in Portland, Oregon, and she said that that the state government has been trying to learn about how they might adopt trust-based approaches, and they've been talking to foundations about how that might work in a state government context, which I thought was interesting. But for me, the real clincher is learning about when I learned about the values-based approach embraced in this perspective. And it includes a set of values that I'm trying to prioritize in my own work: systemic equity, including equitable distribution of power, a relationship-centered approach, servant leadership, transparency, all with a strong attention to learning throughout. So moving on to examine what the term trust-based philanthropy actually means, the trust-based philanthropy project's grounding portion of this webinar, and all of them in the series really, talks about that values are positioned at the very center of this approach, requiring attention to equity and power issues within the organization's culture, structure, leadership, and practice. And since we don't really have that much time today to talk about each one of these, and it's going to be a little less relevant to evaluation, I'm focusing specifically on the practice dimension that really helps us link evaluation practice with what they're doing. And so the 6 practices listed here are those most commonly cited as at the core of implementing a trust-based funding approach. And these include multi-year unrestricted funding, expectations that the foundation staff will do the ongoing homework necessary to learn about that organization and its activities, a reduction in paperwork requirements for grantees, being transparent and responsive in its activities, eliciting and responding to feedback from grantees, and then offering substantive support beyond a simple check-in or check-up on grantees. And I'll talk more about that later. Now, focusing in on one particular aspect of a trust-based practice, that of program evaluation, the shift from doing business as usual to a trust-based approach to evaluation can be described in a nutshell as a transition from that old compliance, monitoring, improving-based reporting to collaborative learning carried out jointly by grantees and the funders. Now, whether or not an evaluator is included in this process will be up to the foundation and or the grantees involved. So why are they going about this shift? It's accomplished not only to reduce the grantee burden, but also demonstrate trust and humility throughout through repositioning grantee and funder at horizontal levels, with both invested in a mutually beneficial relationship as they seek to better understand their communities, the issues at hand, and how best to support grantee impact goals. So how exactly is the shift to be accomplished? Essentially, the funder staff appears to be taking on a different set of tasks that, if done well, are likely to be more time intensive than the traditional top-down edicts for data extraction. Reduction in narrative requirements sync pretty well, I think, with our increased awareness of white dominant cultural elevation of the written word, together with recognition of other valid forms of information sharing and some potentially more amenable to learning all around by different various sectors in our population. And I have to say, as a quick aside, I must admit that the idea of taking the written word out of the learning and evaluation enterprise set a shot of cortisol through my system, because I've always viewed writing as my thing, something I can contribute, I do well, I feel very clear about. But moving on and adapting at the same time, we also have to consider other sorts of structural shifts and other specific adaptations the funder will need to make to accommodate the new way of doing business. So in the next 3 slides, I try to capture at least some of how the 3 webinar panelists, other than the director of the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project, each represent, each of these separate funders have set out on this journey. And so, and these are simply the learnings that matter most to me. I would invite you to chime in, but I can't see you on this new view that I'm using. So we'll, I guess, save if Cheryl wants to flag me to stop at any point, I can. But we can go back and talk about any of this at the end. There'll be plenty of time. This first example comes from the Headwaters Foundation through Brenda Solarsana, the CEO, who I shared a quote from her earlier. Well, my representation of this approach is vastly oversimplified. I think it provides the gist of what they do. There are quarterly learning conversations between the foundation staff and grantees, which provide regular check-ins on how well the process of collaboration is going between the two. And then on a yearly basis, they describe a rich set of grantee-defined outcomes that support the collaborative learning conversations based on better understanding of not only their own initiative, but the overall dynamics of, in this case, the early childhood ecosystem and delivery of healthcare services to various marginalized communities in the foundation's programming area. Then finally, only after 5 to 10 years do the funder and grantees consider long-term impacts by taking a look at fundamental changes in policies, practices, and systems that have occurred in the entire domain of their action. And I found this actually something that requires a little more digging to understand. And I suggest, I Googled Headwaters Foundation Learning Book. And you can see there on their website more about how these levels are defined and how they're implemented. I think there's a 2022 version of the learning book on their site that the results to these 3 levels of inquiry are included for everybody to see, I think, 1 year later. Then in the case of the Satterberg Foundation, their executive director describes what sounded like initial actions to adopt a trust-based approach in their foundation. And they have eliminated written reports in favor of yearly check-ins, slowed the pace of workflow to provide more time for reflection and learning conversations. And in the process, they realized that additional changes were needed in their foundation infrastructure, including, I believe, I don't know, I'm trying to remember if she says this explicitly, or I assume the need to staff up to create more time for funder program staff to dedicate to each grantee. Another structural shift in the Satterberg Foundation work I found on their website, which involves strengthening their efforts to provide general operating support to organizations that serve and partner in communities most impacted by historical and systemic racism. So they've recently shifted from grant making to grantee retention as a primary initiative. And as they put it, instead of taking new applications, we're focusing on the 300 plus nonprofits with whom we are in deep relationship. So it's looking like the foundation's evolution toward a trust-based approach happens in pieces, as Sherry Turitz, the vice president for programs at the American Jewish World Service, put it. So like these first two examples, this funder has simplified data gathering and shifted all or part of the version to the funder staff. Then within that funding organization, a newer evaluation unit has formed deeper ties with their program staff, and decision-making on awards, along with leadership for learning, has shifted to their local staff, housed in multiple offices across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the US. So now a couple of areas that I would like to know more about that were just hinted at, first by Sherry Turitz, who gave a brief note on grantee capacity building, or what some are now calling accompaniment in program evaluation. And I recall her saying that there was more there needing attention than their foundation could do alone, and kind of left it there. So I do wonder more about that. Also, one of the panelists, I'm not sure who at this point, mentioned hiring a consultant to facilitate confidential grantee learning sessions. Something like, I think we've all been involved in this kind of thing now and again. And these are 2 points we can pick up on shortly when we open this up for a bit broader discussion. I'm really rocketing through this pretty well. All right. And apparently, trust-based philanthropy has been around since 2014, at least, when the Whitman Foundation first co-created this strategy based on grantee feedback. However, that approach apparently did not explicitly address evaluation and learning. So as such, foundations and evaluators, as Brenda Solorzano said it, they've had to build that airplane as they learn to fly it. So she believes that, and this was in that blog post on the Trust-Based Philanthropy blog tab, and she thinks that is why there's a bit, part of why the world at large doesn't really understand that there's a lot of rigor built into this approach, even though it's not the traditional one. So now, to my mind, we as evaluators already have at our fingertips multiple highly participatory social justice approaches to evaluation that have recently deepened their cultural response and equity dimensions, and thus strongly complement a trust-based approach to philanthropy. So, and actually, I think that complement is stronger now, even more than the past, due to the fact that the fundamental structure of philanthropy is finally being addressed. So in closing my presentation part of this conversation, we've learned or discussed that trust-based philanthropy is not only gaining in popularity, but also provides a strong foothold for carrying out our social justice work, focused on equitable, anti-racist, and generative shifts in our systems, sociocultural, economic, political systems. And we continue to need reliable information from marginalized communities on what systematic shifts or systemic shifts and additional resources are required, and how well the work is going in efforts to address such challenges. And so as such, there continues to be a need for clear and reliable evidence. And so while our roles as evaluators will undoubtedly shift, much of our skill set is still needed. That brings me to my own lingering questions that I've noted here, but even more importantly, I'd really like to hear your questions, comments, concerns, any experiences you've had in this approach. It'd be great to have that conversation.
This is Donna. I'll ask a question. Thanks for your presentation. This is the first I've really heard about this, thought about this. So apologize if this feels, basic. Are there specific grants and grants that are focused on specific topics where this type of evaluation is preferred or it fits better than with other grant funded work? So I could imagine, for example, Booz Allen works with a lot of federal government agencies and they demand more traditional approaches to evaluation. But there might be work that the federal government should be considering, to your point about their focus on advancing health equity. There might be places where and work that this is more appropriate type of evaluation, or should be married with maybe a hybrid approach where you can integrate this with that more traditional evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think
I
don't know. Like I was talking to grantees here in town, and they said, "Hey, we don't have to report on anything." They feel it's like pretty low key. There a lot of pressure taken off. So I don't really know, and I think with the particularly with all the accountability requirements that our various levels of government have, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to get that message across. But I think, yeah, so I don't really know. Anybody else have some experience or opinion? So now that I can see you all, could you raise your hand if you've heard anything about trust-based philanthropy before, either virtually or you have, Stanley?
Oh, no, I haven't. That's why I'm fascinated with this topic, because this is the first time I ever heard that term. And I go years back with the AEA. I was prior chair of the nonprofit foundation, TIG. And I got to be honest with you, I've never heard of this term before. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm missing something, but, and again, I've done between the 43 years working at HeartShare and my peer reviews, this has got to be the first time I've ever heard of this whole trust-based philanthropy. I've never heard of it before.
Have you worked for foundations in the past or mostly
government? Oh, no. I worked for Catholic Social Services for 43 years, and then I'm also a peer reviewer and a commissioner for the Council on Accreditation. And I've actually reviewed 158 organizations in 37 states and 4 countries. So in all my travels, I've never heard of this term before.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if I'm missing something or whatever it is, but I mean, I'm totally fascinated with this, because again, what exactly, what areas does this cover? Because even when I think, again, I've been more involved in New York than any place else, and I never heard of this in New York.
Mm-hmm. One really high profile individual, is it Mackenzie Phillips? Who's Jeff Bezos' ex-wife? She's popularized that approach. I mean, it's she's gotten some recent press on it, but it has been around for a while. And then apparently it seemed to take more hold during the height of the pandemic, because foundations were having to make quick decisions on how to get money out to grantees, and also to not give too much burden so they could do the work. principles-based management. It's
Sorry, I was just throwing that in the chat. It's like it's a values-based approach to managing teams. But this seems like it's not like a direct offshoot, but it's a similar concept, a value-based approach to philanthropy and
sure.
philanthropic strategy. So I don't know. I just know principles-based management is a fairly common term. So I was wondering if maybe Stanley had heard of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to deal with it in my ecosystem here in town because the Stryker Johnson Foundation has a ton of money that they're giving out to local groups, and I had hoped to target them, especially the smaller, low resource groups. And so I think the collaborative learning is an easy reach for us. What I'm concerned about is the relationship building, because that's something we as evaluators struggle with unless we have a multi-year contract ourselves. And, will the foundation staff up with more people with evaluator kind of knowledge? Will they? I don't know. And then internationally, there's been a shift to locally led initiatives, more local direction. I'm sort of suspicious about how altruistic that is. I think it might be a ROI cost saving kind of move, but that's something I was always frustrated with. I did practical participatory evaluation for the most part in my international work, when I really would like to do empowerment work, and I would, more often than not run up against the wall on that power shift power relations with any involved. And so this is really fulfilling as an idea, but then now, is there going to be a role in this context? Or should I look around for other kinds of things, even though that fits my value set so well? It's something I'm paying attention to.
And I just put Andrea in the chat, a case study that Hub One and the Stryker Johnston Foundation had put out about trust-based philanthropy, because I was familiar with it as well, since I'm in Kalamazoo and I've done some work with Hub One, and so I knew that that's the avenue that they were going to go down.
Oh yeah, Hub One. Did you do a listening session with them?
No, I did some surveys for them during the pandemic.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks. I have that resource now. Appreciate that.
So Kristen, a question for you, since you've done a little bit of this work, is do you feel that the this is back to Andrea's question, that there's a place for evaluators within the context of this, or do you think they're going to start staffing up and internalizing evaluation? I mean, both could be good strategies. I'm concerned. I sort of am concerned about the separation of evaluators, even within a philanthropic organizational structure, right? So the evaluators like off to the side, even if they're staff of the organization and isn't part of the conversations about those relationships. It seems like it would make more sense, especially if you're thinking in terms of capacity building, for the evaluator to be alongside, maybe that accompaniment term that you used, Andrea. What do you think, Kristen? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, there we go.
Okay. I will say I wasn't involved enough to really get a sense of those questions. They had asked me to look at some surveys and do some analysis, so I wasn't as deeply involved in the work as these kind of things would be. So I don't know. Those are all really good questions.
Yeah, because otherwise we're marginalized as technicians then, to some extent. As opposed to people who have some deeper knowledge that they can bring to the table.
Yeah. And it just seems like if there are internal evaluators in an organization, they'll be taking care of it all too. And not, you know,
Perhaps, but sometimes within organizations, that power structure leaves the evaluator off to the side still, and they're only used as technicians, even
Oh,
if they're
yeah.
in.
One thing
Yeah.
the American Jewish World Service did say, Sherry Turret said, is that their units the program staff and the evaluation staff were working in unison more, that their evaluation unit was relatively new, and that the two now were closely allied. So that sounds positive. I would like to have been a fly on the wall at the Michigan Council of Foundations, the Council of Michigan Foundations, and that, you know, to hear did many people go to that breakout group? Did, you know, how was that addressed? Who in Michigan might be doing this?
And I also wonder too, you know, just like there's equity focused evaluation, there's you know, in terms of the philanthropy world, there's GO, grant makers for effective organizations. Where does trust-based philanthropy fit within the context of those, you know, because GO has been around for a while.
What's GO again?
Grant makers for effective organizations. And they do quite a bit with evaluation capacity building for foundations. So are these aligned? You know, that's, or even connected? Is it yet another separate, you know, designer tool, I guess? I don't know how better to say that. And Wes, you mentioned that you felt like this was aligned with the Koch Foundation's approach. Could you maybe give us a little about that, since you seem to have some knowledge there?
Yeah, I'm involved in a like an associate program that they do. But a lot of just the terminology, especially the like that circular graph image that you had on one of the slides. Very similar word like definitions. The top words were just changed. So I know that they use a very, very similar approach, and their philanthropy, it's more investing, right? They don't work a ton with nonprofits. They tend to go with for-profit companies, but they seem to be taking a very similar approach to everything you just outlined, which shocked me. I was not expecting that.
Anybody else have thoughts? We need to learn more. If it's been
I
around
did
since
have a quick
2014.
question.
Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
So this is just kind of a curiosity on my end. I look at trust as something that can reduce transaction costs, right? Make processes a little more efficient. So I was wondering if through the research that you had done, if you'd seen any indication that maybe on like the grant side or on the fundraising side, that increasing these trust levels and focusing on it actually was able to make those areas maybe more efficient or operate more smoothly.
I did not read anything or view anything that talked about that result. I mean, I know they do talk about the relationship being better, and that it sounded like the information was being used more. The information that they gleaned from the various structured conversations between funder and grant maker was resulting in more useful information than the reports that they didn't read. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all I can say.
That kind of reminds me of when you think about the types of indicators that funders, especially, like I'm thinking back to when we had a federal grant and using those Government Performance Responsibility Act sort of indicators are not useful to hardly anyone. It's really the more program level ones, and the only way you can actually identify what those are is to have those conversations and build that trust. So that's kind of refreshing, but then you know, back to, will the government go there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I worked on USAID projects for most of my career, either, you know, as a contractor in USAID or outside it for one of their contractors and nonprofits and firms. And they frequently, at least they used to have a menu of indicators that people could choose from. And so they could roll it up and report back to Congress every year. And the allocations of, you know, funding by country were made somewhat on the basis of reporting out. And of course, the behind the scenes political aspects. It was only a portion of the budget that had anything to do with that. But yeah, I'm just, you know, and so when I was talking with this colleague in Portland just yesterday, then the fact that she said there really was a conversation, the state, of course, that's Oregon. It's a different Portland and different kind of culture out there for their state government, but they were very interested in learning from one of the major foundations, you know, that was practicing this approach, none that I mentioned so far, but I don't remember the name of that one, a large one, how that they could embed some of those practices in their own work. So I don't know if that is going to take hold or not. Of course, we don't know who our next president will be and all kinds of variables.
True, very true. And that, of course, can build trust or negate trust, depending on who it becomes. Any other comments or questions? We're getting close to time today.
All right,
Stan.
can you send the link? I saw that one slide, there was that link on trust-based and basically articles and research or whatever it is. So if by chance you could send that link to me, because I'd be interested in looking at that a little bit more. And maybe as a follow-up, you know, Andrea might want to consider the nonprofit foundation TIG to share this, because again, I think this would probably be very relevant to that TIG.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what link, but I'll send all of
Yeah,
those.
yeah.
Oh, is this it? The guides?
Yeah.
Yeah, the guides and how-tos. I forgot I put that in there.
Right.
That is, that's one thing that I'm going to pay more attention to, those guides and how-tos, because while I do think we really have a good set of tools and, you know, conceptual frameworks at our disposal to do this kind of work already, I want to see how they're framing it, and there could be some new information on what to do in that respect.
Right. And to me, given the years that I've worked in the business, again, one of the major problems with evaluation is the fact that people don't understand exactly what the role of the evaluation group is. And that has always been a problem. And to me, one of the things I learned after 43 years is line staff need to understand what the role of evaluation is. It's the people who are actually doing the work, because sometimes when they truly understand what your role is, you get a better product coming out of it, because they're willing to work with you to actually create and see. So the whole issue about, you know, when you go in and do evaluations, you're looking at strengths and challenges, and you use the word challenges versus deficits, because the assumption is that the only reason why you have evaluators is to get you. All right. And the idea is of actually saying is our goal is to identify what the strengths of the program are, and then also what the challenges are, and then how to work together collaboratively as a group to come up with ways to resolve the problem. And that usually works.
Yeah. And I think at least the good thing about that is, instead of, you know, there's more higher level decision makings behind that desire, because they're facilitating these learning conversations, but they could just easily take evaluators out of the formula. If you know, I don't know. So I'll be curious to follow this.
I guess so. The bottom line answer for today is stay tuned for more.
Yeah.
And maybe
Let's
now
keep
that you've brought
talking.
it, brought our awareness to it, we can all sort of just keep an eye on and have another conversation in a couple months or something after people have had time to look at some of the guides and resources. Maybe there's a way to come up with a list of questions from the evaluator perspective that we could pose to this trust-based philanthropy group or something. Ask them to come talk to us. You know,
Oh.
just an idea
What a great idea.
after we get our questions and ducks in a row.
Yeah. I suspect that Mattia, I'm blanking on her last name now.
Spencer Ruppert, yeah.
Yeah, that she works in that context to some extent.
I know she's doing a lot with the equitable evaluation initiative, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And then she recently posted what the newsletter featured trust as an issue. Now, maybe that's completely independent from this, but I wouldn't be surprised. She works pretty closely with funders.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, we can always ask her to come and join us and have another conversation in the future.
Mhm.
So just for those who are here, a quick poll of do we want to meet in December or take the month off because it's holiday times and whatnot? Who would like to meet? Raise hand.
Let's see what date it would be.
So it's be the third Friday of the month,
Mhm.
correct?
Yep.
I can do it.
As long
And
as we're
maybe we'll
still
just-
meeting online.
Yeah, we are still meeting online, at least for the rest of this year. We haven't made any different change of plans. Well, why don't we plan to go ahead and meet and we'll just maybe have it as an informal sort of end of year chat amongst everybody and just touch base and talk about plans for the future and what we've accomplished for the year.
I like that.
Sure.
Works for
All
me.
right. So we will see you then.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a lot,
much
Andrea.
Hey,
Okay.
Nice
for
job.
contributing to
Thank you,
this.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See
Bye.
ya.